Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Builds for 2021. I've been offline for a bit. I kind of mentioned that was coming up in one of the last videos on Project Off the Shelf. Unfortunately I was laid off, so I've had to put a lot of effort into finding new employment and still working on it. Plus the holidays and everything else going on extended a little longer than I wanted to. But that said, we're back. Welcome to 2021, and we're going to talk a little bit about plans for the upcoming year. Now bear in mind, plans, there's an old expression, man makes plans and fate laughs. So we have our intentions of what we want to get done, and that's going to hinge a lot on what happens on a lot of different fronts. But the first thing coming up is going to be the an upgrade of the green TR7 coupe. We're going to be making a bunch of changes, and we'll get into that shortly. Right after that, we're getting into a series of other projects, including some product updates. So hang on to your hat and get ready for the ride. Let's talk about the green TR7 coupe first, and something I'm going to be calling on the playlist TR7 Evolution. So as you can see, we've got a whole bunch of TR7 on the floor. And what we've done is we've taken the suspension components from the parts car that we did the dismantling project on, and we're going to be going through each and every component, overhauling it and upgrading it. Now this car is not going to go back stock. The steps are all the same whether you're doing stock or mild modification, but in this case we're going to be upgrading a bunch of the components. The TR7 green coupe is going to be become my summer driver, so I'm going to be putting a lot of miles on it. Plus, as I want to get back into motorsports, I'm going to spend a good chunk of this year, if everything goes well, competing in a couple of the local autocross auto slalom series. So we need to make some changes and some upgrades. I want to be able to compete in F Street prepared, so we want to kind of push the limits. But first you got to get everything back in shape. The TR7 was an old car. As you've seen from the videos, we brought it back to life, got her on the road, and did well with it. It's been a good vehicle for us. It had a break for a couple years that we had to deal with, and now we're going to deal with some more things, but I want more out of it. Now the engine and transmission, as you can see here, are ready to go in the car. I'm just waiting on some shifter bushings, and I want to have the rest of the suspension and driveline components ready to go at the same time. So we're going to be disassembling virtually everything. The struts are going to be torn down. We are not going to replace the springs, and we'll get into that when we're into the project, but we are going to be replacing shocks, bushings, gaiters, upper bearing mounts to lighten the steering. We're going to get into more substantial brake upgrades for the front that fall within the rules, and allow us to get everything rebuilt up there as well. Of course, the engine, as I said, it's pretty much it's ready to go in except for the shifter bushings. Up front, we're going to be going through the steering rack, lower control arms, bushings. The front sway bar will be replaced. I'm going to be going to an aftermarket front sway bar that's 34% stiffer. It's allowed within the rules. I take some penalties for it, but that's okay. Makes the car handle better, more fun to drive on the street. At the back, when you switch from a 4-speed to a 5-speed, you have to use the 5-speed drive shaft. And right now you don't see a rear end in the picture because I have to make up my mind on which rear end I'm going to use. TR7s have two different rear ends, a small one and a big one, kind of like the old Mustangs. and I have to decide on gear ratio that I want to use. If I want to stick with the factory 363s, then I'll have to get an adapter to mount this. If I decide to go with 345s or 390s, then I have to go to the larger rear end, and I'll just be using this one as it is. The suspension components here as well, the springs again are going to be reused because of the road conditions where I live. The pavement isn't great, and if I go to stiffer springs, it's going to be tough on the car, and it's going to make it skittish in the corner if it's rough. But we are going to replace all of the bushings throughout the entire suspension system and the subframe with polyurethane bushings, which allows the car to feel better, react better, and improves the handling a little bit, and improves the feel. So we'll get the most we can out of that. Along the way, the rear sway bar will be replaced again with an aftermarket sway bar, which is 34% stiffer. The steering wheel is going to get changed out for a later model one. A new brake booster will be going in, and as I said, we'll be going through the brake system. And of course, can hardly wait to get the engine in. Now this is a pretty big upgrade for the car. We did do a little bit of performance work on it on the initial go through, so it's got a really good exhaust system, 2.5-inch front to back. It's got the better wheels and tires, 15-inch 50 series. We will be replacing the tires because they're just flat worn out. I put a lot of miles on them. And we'll be tweaking the carbs a little more and a few little things like that. But first, we're going to go through the suspension and get everything ready to install, then bring the car come in and change the suspension, engine transmission, all of that stuff, and install all new brake components in one pass. The next project that we'll be creating a playlist for is this engine. It's going to be a development engine for the Geo Metro. You guys will recall Project Off the Shelf, where we put the little car back together and made it solid. I'm quite enjoying driving it. It's getting exceptional gas mileage, and she's been a reliable little rock. But as with any teeny tiny engine, there's not enough power. So this engine is going to be rebuilt, but we're not just going to rebuild it. I want to take the time during building this engine to show you all the neat little touches, tricks that can be done to make them more reliable and gain a little power. We're going to get into port matching the heads, cleaning up the head, I should say, cleaning up the intake manifold, as well as talk about balancing. We're going to get into rod polishing, quite a number of things. Now, this doesn't just pertain to a Geo Metro. Everything that we do on this little engine, you can directly take to a V8, a 6-cylinder, pretty much everything, anything you want. We're not going to be going crazy, but we are going to go through and find every little bit of efficiency, every little bit of performance enhancement we can get within the long block. After that, we're going to be building a header for the car, and the reason we're building, not buying, is there are none. The very few headers that are available for the 3-cylinder engine are incredibly expensive and only available out of Australia, and they're designed for out-and-out racing use. We need one that's going to be set up to get us economically the best efficiency that we can get tied into the 2-inch exhaust system that's on the Metro now. So that's going to be a task in itself. The other part we're going to get into on this one is I would really like to build an induction system. These little Geos run on a throttle body, which is all well and good, but it's a small unit and it's not a complex system. I would like to make a move to either triple carburetors or triple individual runner fuel injection. But again, that means it's all got to be built because you can't buy bits and pieces for this. Stock, these engines are 58 horsepower. I would like to see this one get up into the 70-75 range using all these little tweaks and touches and things that we can do to make it more reliable and more efficient. And when you apply that to something like a 5-liter Ford, for instance, it's a pretty big jump in power. This is a 1-liter engine at 58 horsepower. To get up to 70 horsepower is 12 horsepower. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's just about a 20% increase. So when you look at doing it with a 5-liter Ford, as an example, that 12 horsepower turns into 60, 70 horsepower before you get into the bolt-ons that can go with it. One area that's going to get exciting on this, developing this engine, is camshaft. There are no camshafts other than pure race versions out there. This car needs more cam. So we're going to dig into exactly what we want to do with the camshaft. I have blanks around here that can be reground, and we want to increase the lift and duration and figure out how much of each we want and why, as well as measuring the valved piston clearance to see how much lift we can get away with. Now our third project will be this engine. It's going to become the TR7 development engine. All the other engines in the 7s will be stock. The one going into the green coupe is going to be stock. This one we're going to go through much like we talked about with the Geo motor, but we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to get more into porting and valve bowl work that can be done. We're going to be looking at what we can do within the oiling system and some other components, as well as developing intake and exhaust for the engine. The goal on this engine is for the vintage race car, and it needs to be reliable, as powerful as we can affordably get, and doing it within, again, tight budgets. That's my world. So we're going to be looking hard at what we can do within the Vintage Racing Association rules to build more power and make the car more efficient. After that, we'll continue to use this engine as a mule with the goal of eventually extracting more and more power out of it. Once we reach the point where we can't stick within the VRA rules, we'll build a new engine specifically for the race car, not just a development engine. And this engine I'd like to go on and work on fuel injection and turbocharging for. Now, in addition to these new project playlists, we're also going to be doing some product reviews. There's a phone app, dynamometer, that I've read really good reviews on. So we're going to buy one, install it, and see if it really works and how accurate it is, as well as some other products that are coming up. Everything within Real Builds has been about encouraging people to get back working on their car and getting involved in the car culture. To do that, we've done everything on a tight budget. But we're going to be doing some new stuff, and that may lead to a couple of new channels. With developing the green coupe, there's been a lot of interest from the TR7 community in condensing all of the TR7 content into one channel. So we'll be taking a look at that as well. The other thing that we're going to do is we are going to go racing, and I've raced in the past, as you can see on the walls around. I've done everything pretty much from auto slalom to drag race to oval track to stock cars to road race and rally. And we want to start looking and helping people understand what it takes to get into the sport. So you may see through the year the development of a Real Builds Goes Racing channel, or Real Builds Racing, where we'll go through everything it takes from figuring out how you're going to do it, to safety equipment, what you need in terms of a tow vehicle for what we'll be doing, trailer, building the car, and getting out and competing. I'd like to see 2021, both for Real Builds the Basics and the other stuff we're doing, become a lot more traveling. We want to get out to these events. We want to cover the events as well as car shows, because I still enjoy doing that. And open doors to new parts of the car culture for folks. So that's what our 2021 looks like. And along the way, we'll also be moving to a new editing software to try and up the production quality. In the meantime, over the next little bit, you'll see the first of the playlists start to come to life. And please subscribe, like, share, encourage your friends. The projects are all geared, and they're going to be brought forward as to how you can do it to any car, not just the ones that I happen to have. And that's what's important, is learning the techniques, the technology, and the decision-making processes in developing these things. As I said with the TR7 suspension work, we're not taking the typical route of really stiff springs and really stiff shocks, because that won't work as a daily driver, and it sure won't work on anything but a smooth surface. So we're making decisions where we can keep this vehicle as a driver and a competitive all-in slalom car. As always, please leave a comment if this is the kind of thing that you'd like to see. If you have suggestions, if you've got questions, fire us a line and we'll be more than happy to do it. And any other thoughts you have on Real Builds, how we can improve the channel, they're always welcome. So until next time, that's it from Real Builds and BS and Bench Racing, and we'll talk to you soon.